Hey everyone, this is a little bit late. I wanted to post the astrology of January. I didn't post it on the 1st like I like to. It's 10 days late, mainly because I was dealing with some existential issues. So apologies. I'm going to do my best to always post on the 1st if you are following this. And I'm going to kind of cover the stuff that happened in the beginning of the month, only insofar as it's important and it relates. I have my computer, of course, because it's important to have the things that I need to kind of point out in front of me. So the things that I missed from not being here to record was the new moon in Capricorn, and that happened on January 2nd. So it happened right after the new year. We talked about this a little bit in Clubhouse if you follow the room. That was just that we're in a 6 year. So 6 numerology has to do with kind of material perfection and actually material attainment, whereas the 9 has more to do with spiritual perfection or idealism. The 6 really has to do with material idealism. So people who have strong 6s in their charts tend to have high standards for things and also have the kind of grit to not to not take anything beneath standards. So 6 years is going to be very grounding. There's going to be a stabilizing energy to it. A lot of the stuff that happened in 2021 in a 5 year is going to be kind of expanded upon, but maybe settled into. So we may have faced a lot of change in 2021, and the 6 year is going to come through and kind of give us a level of the seeds that are getting planted from the change. So where are we moving from all of the kind of craziness that was 2021? And so I'm looking forward to it generally. 2021 was a very existentially crisis prone year for me. I cut off all my hair. I broke up with my boyfriend. I broke up with my job and my apartment. And so it's nice to be in an energy that feels a little bit more stabilizing. But the new moon in Capricorn happened on the 2nd. And this is important because right now we're in Capricorn season. Capricorn season is ruled by Saturn, which is a planet of structure and constriction and negation. So Saturn always looks to teach you lessons about the things that you aren't paying attention to, the things that you aren't saying no to when you should be saying no to. Saturn has a way of kind of building up on those until you reach some kind of crisis point. Personally, I'm kind of finishing up my Saturn return, and so I'm dealing with a lot of the loose ends that I've created in my 20s, and I'm seeing how Saturn works in real time. And so this month, January, the end of December, and then also into February for Aquarius season, we're in Saturn's season, we're in his time frame. And so it's just important to kind of think about Saturn during this time of year. I always think it's interesting because Saturn season really rings in the time where we have to start counting our debts and counting the things that we have been spending our money on during Jupiter's time in Sagittarius when we go through Sag season. So there's a kind of cold, bleak, seriousness to it, a very okay, we have to fix things, we have to change things, we have to be a little bit more responsible, reliable, predictable than we were before, because we're kind of dealing with some of the consequences of overabundance and overexpansion in the beginning of December, and also November for that matter. It's interesting because both Thanksgiving and Christmas fall into Jupiter season. So lots of food, lots of eating, lots of revelry, lots of seeing people, lots of connections, lots of buying presents. It's no wonder that Black Friday falls after Thanksgiving, which is in Jupiter's season in Sagittarius, where we start really hardcore spending. I don't think that this is on accident. I really think that the powers that be know this and know better. with all of the holidays and things like that, and just kind of giving us the extra push to be spending a lot during Sag season, because we're already kind of prone to do it and to overindulge. So in January, we start to pare back and decide, okay, this has been a little bit too much. This is where I have to reevaluate and reestablish patterns and start saving again and start thinking about, where we want to make proactive changes in our life. So that's all Saturn stuff. And the new moon that happened on the 2nd was, of course, in Saturn's sign. A new moon is when the sun and the moon are on the exact same degree. So from our perspective, it looks like the moon is completely dark because it's in front of the sun. So that's why we see only the dark side of the moon, because the sun and the moon are basically it's like sun, moon, us. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to think about how for the new moon in Capricorn, we are, first of all, dealing with what I said before about kind of the new year, the practicality of it. But on top of that, I talked about this last month, which is that we've had Venus retrograde in Capricorn for, gosh, I think it started in the third week of December. And it basically did this thing where it started moving really slow in the beginning of December, and it was just hanging out over the 25th degree of Capricorn, and lo and behold, the 25th degree is exactly where Pluto is. And so we have Venus, who is moving forward, start to slow down. Pluto, already a slow-moving planet, was just chilling there when Venus caught up to it, and it just stood still for a little while before it turned retrograde on top of Pluto. And then it went forward a little bit past Pluto, and then it started retrograding back over Pluto. And so we have this energy in the new moon in Capricorn that has a lot to do with Pluto and Venus, my favorites, of course. So there's that, and that's going to color or add flavor, add spices to the new moon in Capricorn. Also, we have Mercury right now. It's getting ready to turn retrograde. It's already in its shadow. It's in Aquarius. It moved into Aquarius on the 2nd, and it is going to have its whole retrograde happening, and it's going to be happening through the end of the month. So we have Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde in Saturn sign simultaneously, which means they're both taking cues from Saturn about how they're going to show up in our lives. And so we can, of course, always, my dear friend and astrologer Laura always says that, be your own astrologer. And that's very much the case. You have to kind of see how these things are going to show up for you in your own life, because it's not at all a one-size-fits-all situation. It's very dependent on what's happening in your own chart. Anyone who's very Saturn ruled is going to potentially feel it more intensely. But then also the people who have planets who are getting transited over during the Venus retrograde, especially at that 25th degree of cardinal signs, but then also with Mercury in Aquarius, Aquarians are going to get their fair share of energy too. So the fixed signs really as well are going to be feeling it. So both of those things happen on the 2nd, but Mercury's turning retrograde on the 14th. And then on January 16th, we have the sun conjunct Pluto. So the new moon cycle, like I was saying, is basically a movement from where the moon is conjunct or conjoined or on the same degree as the sun. And then it moves around from its first quarter, where we see half the moon in the sky, to full, where we see the full moon, and then to the third quarter and back to new moon. This sun conjunct Pluto, again, we have a very Pluto flavor to the month, because This month we have, like I said, Venus retrograding, or it had retrograded over Pluto, but Pluto is also going to figure very strongly into the full moon. So new moon, we had Sun conjunct moon. Full moon, we're going to have Sun conjunct Pluto opposite the moon in Cancer, because the full moon's always 180 degrees apart, and because the astrology wheel, the zodiac wheel, is a circle, there's always signs that are at polarity points with each other. So we have Cancer and Capricorn as a polarity that we're going to have some, let's just say, fun with for the full moon this month. So if there's been anything that's been coming up around Pluto, right, this has to do with transformation, but also Venus themes where maybe there's a change of values. Maybe there's situations in your life where you are being asked to really show up for your values or really stand in your values, if they are your values at all, right? Maybe you're exploring new territory when it comes to the way that you show up sexually or in your own physicality, when it comes to attraction, who you're attracted to, why you're attracted to them, what kind of patterns that, you know, is indicative of in your life. All of these things are very Pluto x Venus situation. And then on top of that, of course, we have the sun and the moon. The sun in Saturn sign on top of Pluto for the full moon, and Cancer, a Cancer moon, which is all about home and family and like what makes you feel safe and cared for. So sun and Pluto is like power dynamic, struggles, catharsis, extreme changes, extreme transformations. And then Cancer moon is like, let's be cuddly, let's be soft. And so we don't really have, I wouldn't say it's like it's not a warm and fuzzy full moon. It is a full moon that is asking us a lot. And I'm going to post on the full moon as well about this, because so much has happened for me personally because of this 25th degree of cardinal signs, because I have my Venus that's being activated with it. And a lot of my old patterning has been coming up around just not just relationships, but how I kind of show up for myself in them, and how I attempt to kind of race ahead of rejection so that I don't get hurt, instead of just like kind of being what it is I am. There's this, with Pluto, there's a tendency to plot and plan, and also an attempt to control. And yet when we try and control things, we end up basically sticking our fucking foot, excuse my French, right in the middle of the flow, and we ruin the flow because we're trying to control it. So there's going to be themes around control as well with this Venus and Pluto and sun and moon situation that we have, and Saturn, right? Saturn is hosting Venus and Mercury, and by the time the full moon happens too, we have Mercury in Saturn sign. So we have a lot going on in a Saturn way. And so, you know, consistently we're being asked with Saturn, how do we find a way to plant ourselves in the present by pulling forward from the past the things that are important and integral to the way that we are, while simultaneously moving into the future, Aquarius, right? So the past is very Capricorn like, holding on to the past, taking the good parts of the past, and then, like I said, Aquarius is the future. Technology, how do we integrate these two very different things, right? Because this is the first time in our entire history, as far as I know, that we have access to the amount of information that we have, and it's really easy to let that information be something that is stifling, that is distracting, that is addictive, that is drug-like, you know, versus how can we use it properly based on what we already know from the past about what it takes to be human, and doing it in a way that is healthy and sustainable. And so many of these things are kind of coming into odds with each other, these themes of past and future. We can't really throw the past out, even though there's a lot of things that aren't really relevant anymore, just because we're dealing now with a situation where our parents' parents, they never had access to what we have now. They don't even fully understand what it is that we're able to do online, right? They didn't have lives like we have now. They didn't have situations where they're staring at their computer screens or their cell phones for hours on end. And, they didn't have the ability to reach the amount of people that we can, basically, in the modern era. But it's really easy to let the old die because we are too focused on the future, on what we can do. And I think it's important during this season that we remember that we're still human, and we have, very specific needs, and we can't really falter too far away from what our needs are, just as humans in general. And we kind of need to have this, moment of like revelation around how we want to move forward into the future, and like what we can actually expect of ourselves, because the AI can do things that we can't do, right? The internet can move at speeds that we can't move at, right? Our minds aren't meant to move that fast. Now, there's an argument here for evolution, right? And like us moving quickly. And so more or less like having a new generation of people come out that can handle the kind of frenetic pace that we have, found in modern society, thanks to having this little looking glass in our pocket where we can see and do and look at and learn anything we want in a moment's notice. So with a Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde, I'm just feeling very strongly about these two things, and the requirement that we have to kind of be true to our humanity while still acknowledging that the future is really here now, and it is going to pull us forward whether or not we like it, and we should use it to the best of our abilities. Yes, we're not going to be perfect with it, right? That's part of the humanity aspect of it. But there is ways to train ourselves, right? To be disciplined enough to kind of use what we have in a way that is grounded, in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is conducive to our kind of continuity as a species in general, instead of just letting it become something that we lose our consciousness to, and we just become like the characters in WALL-E, or even worse, like the Matrix. The characters in WALL-E are all just like being shuttled around on these like hover seats. They're all just drinking lots of sugar and looking at their screens. And I'm sure many of you guys have seen The Matrix. If you haven't, you should watch it. I mean, it's a little bit old, but where they're all in their pods, right? They're like experiencing virtual reality instead of like actually being human and actually dealing with humanness. They're being kind of fed a feed of information that they think is the real world, but actually isn't the real world. And so we find ourselves here, and like there's moments where I get so apathetic towards it all because it feels so overwhelming. Enter existential dread of the past 10 days. And then there's moments that I feel really empowered. And so trying to hold space for both of those things, because again, like we're messy, we're inconsistent, we are, failure prone in many ways. And there's the only way we can really do this properly is if we give ourselves a lot of slack while simultaneously kind of holding on to a shared vision of just bettering ourselves generally, and not staying stuck or staying unconscious, staying in pattern behaviors, staying in places where we are comfortable but we're not growing. This is a really big thing right now because, you know, with connection, right? Venus retrograde having to do with connection, and Mercury retrograde too actually having to do with this theme. There's a level of like, I see people being able to tap out, right? Of like actually doing the hard work of connecting with other people. I see them just being able to, you know, if you're in a room with family, everybody's looking at their phone, somebody's watching the TV, somebody's on the computer, nobody's actually dealing with the messiness of just being human together. And so you can be in a room full of people but be alone. And so I think that the themes around loneliness and real connection, and what real connection looks like, and kind of the internal decision that we all have to make about doing what we have to do, even if it means being vulnerable, being put in uncomfortable situations, being put in situations where we could be rejected. Even if it means all of those things, we still choose connection over the kind of false microdosing effect that we have of social connection that's available to us online. Now, I don't want to say that it's a bad thing, right? Because it's amazingly connective, but like we can also use it to disassociate from uncomfortable moments and uncomfortable feelings and things that just, you know, we don't have the capacity to deal with. We just kind of burrow away into our internet world and not actually like be in our bodies. I'm a Pisces, so I disassociate like it's my job. And so for us, for those of us that are idealists, I think it's important that we kind of figure out how to, you know, compassionately hold ourselves accountable to each other and be in connection with each other. Because if we don't have the friction that comes from, you know, failures and vulnerabilities and rejections, then we're not going to have the ability to kind of grow. We're just going to stay stuck. And so the movement forward has so much to do with like the individual choice to make decisions that feel uncomfortable in the moment in order to gain the necessary friction, incentive to move forward and have real connections, right? Because social media is amazing, but again, it doesn't stand in for, you know, for real like embodied human love, where you fully see somebody and they see you too. So yeah, I think that is important. I'm starting to lose light here, so I'm going to try and move myself along. So we already talked about the full moon in Cancer. Uranus is going direct on the 18th, which means that the Uranian themes that we've been dealing with all of 2021, so part of the kind of mass change that we experienced in 2021 was because, well, it was shown, it was reflected back in the fact that we had a Saturn and Uranus square, which Uranus is the planet of sudden change and Saturn's the planet of stability and structure. And so we had these two planets going at it in an uncomfortable, tense way, that there was not a clear path forward or a kind of middle ground to be found. And so Uranus is going to be direct, which means anything that has been taking a moment to not be moving forward, anything that seems to have gotten stuck for a second is going to start its forward motion again. Again, that's going to have to do with charts and things like that, but that's something that I wanted to mention because it's also retrograde right now. And the outer planets are a little bit more tricky because we don't feel them as directly in our present moment. They're more like of background themes that are happening that we get to look back on and see clearly after time has passed. We have the sun going to Aquarius, of course, which is why we have Capricorn and Aquarius energy at 2 months in a row, the first 2 months of every year. And then we have Mars in Capricorn on the 24th, which is actually going to be really interesting because Mars in Capricorn is exalted. And so this is the first time we have Mars back in Capricorn since 2020, when this whole fucking pandemic shit happened. Sorry, I'm like cussing. That's the first time we had it there. And so we had this exalted Mars really kind of just burrowing through all of the other planets that were in Capricorn in 2020 that like heralded in the start of what was going to be the kind of coronavirus and pandemic years that we're going to look back on later, I'm sure. So the 24th, Mars in Capricorn, and then yeah, and an exalted Mars is helpful because it will give us the grit, like I was saying before, to actually make necessary changes that we need to create some structure, some stability, to make some movement forward. I'm looking forward to it because I've been living at home for the past like 5 months or so now. And I think that when I see Mars go into Capricorn and Aquarius, I'm going to start thinking about moving and my next steps. So I can, I can kind of look at that for me as a Scorpio rising as something that I think is going to be generally good. Capricorn is the feminine earth sign of Saturn, and so it cools down Mars, slows it down, it makes it more structured. And then on January 29th, we have Venus direct. So Venus will move back to going forward from our perspective. And importantly, I would just say that it's not over until the beginning of March, because Venus was around the 26th or 27th degree of Capricorn, and then it moved retrograde, and then it's going to go back direct, and it's not going to hit those degrees that it was originally at until March. And so even though it's going direct, it's going to be some forward momentum, but at the same time we're going to have to kind of wait out any like long-standing things that have been happening to see how they play out until March. So yeah, so I think that's gonna just about cover it. I'm about to lose light, so I think this is a perfect time to end. And yeah, like I said, next month I'm going to try and be more timely, Saturn, and not fall into existential dread for any period of time, although who knows. It's an existentially difficult time, I think. So again, if you're experiencing that, give yourself a lot of compassion and understanding, because nobody wrote a rule book on how to deal with post-pandemic era 21st century. Okay, so I think that is going to do it. Thank you for listening if you've been here, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. Okay, take care.